Jonathan Antoine's journey begins long before the world ever heard the breathtaking tenor voice that would stop Britain's Got Talent in its tracks. It begins in the quiet corners of childhood, where a sensitive, introverted boy learned to survive the harshness around him by clinging to music as if it were the only language that truly understood him, because in many ways it was. His unusual vocal timbre emerged early, a rare natural resonance that teachers immediately recognized as extraordinary, even before Jonathan himself understood what lived inside him. And by age 11, when most children were still discovering who they were, he was already shaping a gift powerful enough to transform his future. Yet those early years were marked not only by artistic growth, but by deep emotional wounds, relentless bullying over his appearance, his softness, his quiet spirit, leaving scars that he hid behind careful smiles and hesitant laughter, turning instead to the safety of melodies that hugged him tighter than anyone else did. At West Hatch High School, fate placed him in the paths of two remarkable mentors, Jenny Evington and Jeanette Brown, women who saw past the insecurity and the round-faced boyhood awkwardness, and saw instead the unstoppable force of a world-class tenor waiting for a reason to believe in himself. Under their guidance, Jonathan didn't just sing, he bloomed, mastering pieces far beyond his age, including the haunting Bring Him Home at just 13, a performance so moving it earned him the Young Musician of the Year title, and his first glimpse of the impact his voice could have on strangers' hearts. As adolescence reshaped his body and deepened his tone, Jonathan auditioned for prestigious conservatories in London, securing acceptance into all of them and ultimately choosing the Royal Academy of Music, unaware that destiny was already planning a moment far bigger than any music school stage. That moment came in 2012 when a nervous 17-year-old walked onto the Britain's Got Talent stage beside his best friend Charlotte Giaconelli, a partnership born out of school hallways and mutual love for music. He stood trembling before the judges, especially Simon Cowell, who eyed him with the kind of skepticism reserved for contestants who didn't look the part of a star, and in that breath before the music began, Jonathan felt every childhood insult, every doubt, every silent prayer. Then he opened his mouth, and the world shifted. The first notes of the prayer floated into the auditorium with such purity, richness, and emotional weight that the audience gasped. Simon's expression snapped from judgment to disbelief, and Charlotte's bright soprano wove around Jonathan's voice with a tenderness that amplified his power, instead of overshadowing it. Within minutes, the two teenagers had created one of the most unforgettable moments in reality TV history. As the audition clip went viral, millions of views pouring in from all over the world, Jonathan's life changed in ways he could never have imagined. Overnight, the bullied boy became the new Pavarotti. The boy with a golden voice, the teenager who could bring grown adults to tears in seconds. Strangers stopped him in the streets, headlines praised him endlessly, and fans embraced him with a warmth he'd never experienced. But fame, as intoxicating as it was, struck Jonathan with the force of a tidal wave, overwhelming his fragile sense of self. While Charlotte stepped into the spotlight with natural confidence, Jonathan often seemed dazed by it, like someone who had been thrown onto a moving train without warning. The friendship between them, rooted in years of schoolyard trust, became the emotional backbone of their journey. On stage, she watched him with protective confidence, gently nudging him forward with her presence whenever fear threatened to paralyze him, creating a duo whose authenticity resonated even deeper than their voices. Together, they became Jonathan and Charlotte, a partnership that Britain adored. Two teenagers bound not by manufactured chemistry but by genuine affection, shared dreams, and the kind of unspoken understanding that can only grow between two people who have survived school hallways, private fears, and musical rehearsals side by side. Their story captivated viewers not just because of their extraordinary harmonies, but because of the emotional truth behind them. A shy, hurting boy whose voice could move the heavens, and a friend who believed in him fiercely enough to help him step into the light when he no longer had anywhere left to hide. After their unforgettable rise on Britain's Got Talent, Jonathan Antoine and Charlotte Giaconelli stepped into a world neither teenager was fully prepared for, signing a major recording contract with Simon Cowell's Psycho label, a leap that would have overwhelmed even seasoned performers, let alone two young artists still learning who they were. Their debut album together arrived in 2012, overflowing with operatic and crossover classics that showcased the magic of their blended voices. And as it reached audiences around the world, the duo became international ambassadors of a rare and refreshing authenticity that felt almost revolutionary in a fame-obsessed pop culture landscape. Their second album, Perhaps Love, released in 2013, revealed how much they'd grown since that first trembling audition, Charlotte's soprano gaining richness, Jonathan's tenor deepening with emotional intensity. But behind the acclaim, Jonathan wrestled with a private storm that fame couldn't silence. On stage, he delivered performances that audiences described as otherworldly, but offstage, the insecurities that had followed him since childhood resurfaced under the pressure of being judged, not only for his voice, but for how he looked, how he moved, even how he breathed. As their careers accelerated, another truth became harder to ignore. The artistic paths of Jonathan and Charlotte were gently diverging. Charlotte felt drawn toward contemporary musical theater and pop-influenced crossover styles, while Jonathan's heart gravitated more powerfully toward pure operatic repertoire, the kind of music that made his soul feel anchored rather than stretched. By 2014, it was clear that though they loved performing together, their dreams were no longer aligned, and their professional split, announced with grace, respect, and genuine affection, marked a moment of both excitement and fear, especially for Jonathan, who suddenly had to step into a spotlight without the steady presence of the friend who had shielded him during his most vulnerable moments. Both were offered solo contracts with Sony Classical, but for Jonathan, going solo meant standing face-to-face with his own reflection for the first time, confronting the question every artist eventually must: who am I without someone beside me? His debut solo album Tenore, released in October 2014, answered that question with breathtaking clarity. An ambitious, unapologetically operatic project featuring pieces like Panis Angelicus and La Donna è Mobile, selections that demanded technical mastery and emotional depth, both of which Jonathan delivered with a maturity far beyond his years. Critics praised him for proving that he was not just a charming talent show discovery, but a serious tenor capable of shaping a long and meaningful career. Yet the independence he gained came with a new kind of vulnerability. Without the buffer of a duo, he faced heavier scrutiny, harsher criticism, and a bigger spotlight, all of which amplified his lifelong struggles with self-esteem and body image. Jonathan had endured years of bullying long before he ever stepped on the BGT stage. Children mocking his size, his sensitivity, his softness, and even after fame offered validation, the old wound still ached, especially when social media users attacked him with the same cruelty he thought he'd left behind. They commented on his weight, his looks, his shyness, reducing his artistry to superficial judgments, and for someone as deeply sensitive as Jonathan, these barbs cut through him in ways that applause could not heal. Yet, in time, Jonathan began a quiet, powerful transformation. Not to please the critics or fit an industry mold, but to reclaim the body he felt had been taken from him by years of pain and insecurity. He embraced healthier eating, gentle movement like walking, and made small, consistent changes fueled by one motivation: to feel stronger, healthier, and more capable of supporting the incredible instrument he was born with. As the weight gradually dropped, his confidence rose, not because of public approval, but because he finally felt aligned with himself, more grounded in his own presence, more able to stand on a stage without shrinking inward. Fans celebrated this change not because he looked different, but because he felt different, lighter in spirit, clearer in purpose, glowing with a newfound comfort in his own skin. And of course, with this transformation came whispers and speculation about his personal life, imaginations running wild in ways fame often invites. But Jonathan, ever private and introspective, chose to keep that part of his story close to his heart, reminding everyone that behind the operatic power, behind the public journey, he remained a human being carving out his identity at his own pace, proving that his evolution, both as an artist and as a man, was far from over and perhaps only just beginning. Jonathan Antoine's life beyond the spotlight had always stirred curiosity, particularly about romance, because from the moment his voice stunned the world as a teenager, people wanted to know not only who he was as an artist, but who he was when the lights faded, and early speculation often swirled around his partnership with Charlotte Giaconelli, whose onstage chemistry with him was undeniable. But Jonathan shut those rumors down immediately, calling them creepy and insisting they were more like siblings than anything romantic. Yet the first real window into his private heart came years later when he revealed a relationship with a Canadian woman named Michelle Doucet, a connection born through online conversations that slowly transformed into something deep and stabilizing. And Jonathan spoke of her with a warmth and sincerity that made it clear she was an anchor in his life, calling her the light of my life, and crediting her as a muse for his 2016 album Believe. Still, he kept most of his love life shielded from the public eye because Jonathan has always preferred letting his art speak louder than his personal details. And even as romance added quiet comfort to his life, his music remained the force carrying him into extraordinary heights. After Tenore marked his powerful debut, his 2016 album Believe showcased not only his operatic might, but an evolving versatility that allowed classical, sacred, and crossover pieces to coexist in a cohesive emotional tapestry, proving his desire to reach listeners of all ages while remaining loyal to the tradition that shaped him. Then came 2020's Going the Distance. Released in the middle of a global pandemic, an album fans embraced as a sanctuary during worldwide uncertainty, blending iconic classics with surprising new choices that reflected Jonathan's deepening emotional maturity and the lifetime of feeling that now infused his interpretations. Touring became another defining chapter. Jonathan performed across Europe and the United States, greeting audiences who had first discovered him in grainy YouTube clips. And with each performance, he strengthened the foundation of a career that refused to fade the way reality show fame so often does, building a loyal global fan base that continues to support every step forward he makes. While he isn't the flashy celebrity type, his career has provided significant financial stability, with outlets estimating his net worth between $1.5 and $5 million, earned through album sales, tours, international performances, and long-term industry respect. Yet despite this success, Jonathan remains grounded, repeatedly saying music for him isn't about wealth or fame, but about connection, healing, expression, and offering the world something honest in a time when honesty is rare. Looking ahead, he seems poised to explore new artistic frontiers, perhaps composition, perhaps grander international collaborations, perhaps new forms of classical crossover aimed at younger audiences, as he has hinted in interviews his desire to make classical music more accessible for those who never felt it belonged to them. But one of the most profound turning points came in 2022 when Jonathan publicly revealed that he had been diagnosed as autistic, a moment that completely reframed how he understood himself. For years, he felt out of step with the world, overwhelmed by social environments, exhausted by fame's demands, and constantly questioning why he processed life differently. But the diagnosis brought clarity, helping him reinterpret his past not as personal failure, but as the natural experience of a neurodivergent mind trying to navigate a world not built for it. Jonathan's decision to share this publicly deepened the love his fans had for him, breaking stigma and reminding people that a brilliant career and autism are not contradictions but can coexist beautifully. And for Jonathan, the diagnosis marked not an ending, but a beginning, a chance to understand himself more gently, to manage his mental health more effectively, and to embrace a life defined not by confusion, but by self-compassion. As he found this internal clarity, he also refused to neglect his physical health. Long criticized for his weight since childhood, Jonathan finally focused on himself rather than outsiders' opinions, slowly losing weight through mindful eating and daily walking, not for aesthetic approval, but for stamina, longevity, confidence, and control over his body. And fans celebrated not just the change in appearance, but the glow that came from inner peace. As he grew, so did his commitment to helping others. Jonathan used his platform to speak openly about anxiety, bullying, and mental health, co-authoring the children's book Jonathan and the Porcupine to help young readers cope with bullying, appearing in the documentary Anxious Nation to shed light on youth anxiety, and advocating for neurodiversity, kindness, and the transformative power of music. He expressed a dream of making music education more accessible to disadvantaged children, knowing from experience how profoundly a single supportive voice can change a young person's life. Today, whether through new albums, global tours, speaking engagements, advocacy work, or heartfelt messages to fans, Jonathan Antoine continues to evolve into not just an extraordinary musician, but an extraordinary human being, one whose journey has been shaped by vulnerability, resilience, authenticity, and a wholehearted desire to use his gift not just to perform, but to heal, uplift, and inspire everyone who hears his story.